On today's episode of Survival Dispatch News, we discuss sudden violence that has recently happened at some huge events, including the Super Bowl parade. Are you prepared? Hey guys, welcome back to Survival Dispatch News, a special edition, I should say. Some very newsworthy things have been happening. I'm going to discuss it with my good friend Sal De Janeiro. Welcome back to the show, Sal. Nice
Good
to
to see you,
have you.
Denny.
Absolutely. As always, we're going to kick things off with a conflicted card. What's the conflicted question of the day?
This is a good one, actually. So here's the conflicted question for today. Martial law has been declared, and police and military are going house to house, looking for food, water, and other supplies to confiscate. Your supplies are well hidden and would not be found through normal questioning and searching procedures. However, the official coming to your house is a relative and knows what you have. He he informs you that it is his duty to take your supplies or arrest you and your family. How would you address this
Jeez,
situation?
some kind of relative that is, huh? Well,
Yeah, yeah, right.
I got some
Who needs
opinions on that.
enemies? Who needs enemies when you have a relative like that?
Yeah. All right. So mull it over, viewers at home. Sal, you be thinking about it. I'll be thinking about it. Good Lord. That's another good one. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
another good one.
All right. Jumping right into the topic today. Some top of the news worthy items, things that have happened recently. One of which, the shooter at Joel Olstein's church in Houston, Texas. Very interesting circumstances there. And the Kansas City Super Bowl parade shooting incident. Two separate incidents that have really kind of separate circumstances. And what does that mean to us? How can we, prepare ourselves to handle things like that? We're going to talk about both of these incidents just a little bit, Sal. And let's discuss, first let's talk about that lone wolf attack at the church. What can you tell us about the person who did that? Educate us a little bit.
Well, this is very interesting because I will remind viewers that the show you and I did a couple of weeks ago, where we talked about lone wolf attacks, I believe I specifically mentioned in that show how historically this is entirely a male-dominated thing that happens, right?
Right.
With
Yep.
the one exception that I can think of readily would be the husband and wife duo who shot up the San Bernardino Christmas party back in like 2015 or something like that,
Yep.
okay, which was a terror attack. Outside of that, this is a male-dominated party, obviously, this kind of mass violence. This particular individual is biologically female.
Mm-hmm.
And based on everything that I could find, they self-identified as male. So we're again wading into this very bizarre trans ideology, which now we have seen multiple violent attacks by people who identify as one thing or another, trans in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't like going down the road of say, oh, all trans
Right.
people are violent because that's
Of course not.
ridiculous, right?
Of
Right.
course.
We don't like when the left tries to spin the thing about,
Right.
white males are all violent, etc. So we don't play that game.
Right.
But these are the facts of the case. What's interesting here, though, for me, beyond the whole trans thing. So we've seen a few different escapades with trans people, specifically targeting houses of worship. But what's interesting here is that this is a biological female. So
Right.
so between 2 weeks ago and now, we have literally a game changer in terms of seeing mass, at least an attempted mass murder perpetrated by a biological female, which is exceedingly rare. So,
Mm-hmm.
as far as I'm concerned, that's the most notable thing of this
Yeah.
particular incident.
Yeah, this is a 36-year-old woman. Reading my notes here, Janess Yvonne Moreno. To my knowledge, she did not have any gender reassignment surgery. Not that it would matter. In this case, a person doing crazy stuff is a person doing crazy stuff, regardless. The kid she had with her was her child, right? Was that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Her biological child.
Wow, that kid has to live through that. So she was neutralized by off-duty police officer. I assume they were assigned as security there at the church. This is Joel Osteen's megachurch. This is the big church in Houston, Lakewood Church. Kind of, has some notoriety there. Joel Osteen being a very well-known person, and just what a tragic situation. Sal, to your knowledge, was anyone else injured in that shooting?
Just the child, who I don't know if the child has passed or is still alive, but the last I saw, tragically, it did not look good for the outcome of the child, who also got hit when they had to do what they had to do to neutralize this woman as she, attempted to commit mass murder. Now, what's interesting is, if we look at the background, what I could find as far as what's available thus far, mental illness going on, certainly, in the background of this individual. There's an ex-husband who has accused her of being, violent, confrontational. I read somewhere that there was a diagnosis at some point of schizophrenia, etc. Now, what I find more interesting than anything else is if it is indeed verified that there was a Free Palestine or a sticker that says Palestine on the gun. So what's interesting here is harken back to the discussion we had 2 weeks ago about what is the similar profile of these people over and over again. And I'll give the audience a hint. It's not anything to do with the trans ideology. It's not anything to do with pro-Palestine, pro-Israel, anti-Palestine, anti-Israel. It has nothing to do with where you come down with that international conflict. It has to do with the fact that all of these people fall into this victim mentality, that they are a victim. This individual is not Middle Eastern at all. They're Hispanic of some sort, Central American. Okay. So the reason for the Palestine thing, I don't think it's terror related in any way. It is simply that is the current victim narrative. And again, I'm not even wading into where I stand on that issue. I think, there's a perspective that's valid on both sides of that issue. What I'm saying is that currently it is actually a social movement now, right, where Palestine is considered the oppressed, Israel is considered the oppressor. Again, could care less about that discussion. That's not what I'm wading into. What I'm saying is people who tend to act out in this manner fall into, whatever the current flavor of victimization is, you'll see it manifest in them.
A little bit more background on the shooter there. There are records that this person had a history of criminal history and mental health issues as well. She went by a number of different aliases, including male and female names. She was under an order for emotional detention back in 2016, has a mental health history that's documented by Houston police. So this is a person, obviously, a lot of crazy crap going on in this person's mind. And unfortunately, there was a child involved as well. And what a terrible, terrible circumstance. So this is the first incident we're talking about, this lone wolf attack at church. One person committing the violent act in a church, in a public setting. And, we've talked about this in the past, Sal, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't remind our viewers of some things to keep in mind when you're out in public and prepared. Are you prepared, viewers, for incidents like this? I ask myself these things every day when I think about this, or when I hear about these incidents. I think, man, what would I have been prepared? Do I have the mental capacity to react appropriately to this? What if I have my family with me, which we often do in these public environments, Sal? So let's reiterate some of the things that we've talked about in the past, and that the things that we need to think about when we're out in public, so that if we're in the middle of something like this, at least we have some kind of plan.
Yeah, what makes it so complicated is the immense crowd, and both of the incidents we're talking about tonight are very crowded locations. And the first thing that comes to my mind every time I see an incident like this play out is In one sense, the crowd is the advantage to the concealed carrier civilian that's on location, because we've had this discussion in the past. Vast
Yep.
majority of the time when a concealed carrier interdicts active killers, they win the vast majority of the time. One of the reasons is because the crowded environment, that killer has many different targets that they're honing
Yep.
in on, and you as the self-defender have one typically,
Right.
right?
Good point.
So so that is a potential advantage. The obvious disadvantage is just the absolute chaos. You can imagine the amount of people who are getting up, who are moving, who are running around.
The
Are you going?
noise.
Yeah, the noise. How long will it take you to even process who is the threat? Where
Yeah.
is the threat? If you're just hearing gunfire. Now, this was ended so quickly by the security that was there, right? It would have been really a non-issue at that point for anybody actually carrying in the
Right.
church. But where I go with this kind of stuff is if you're the individual, at a small church, in a small town America, you probably don't have ex-police officers who are contracted as, security guards like the
Not
Joel
likely.
Osteen church does.
Yeah.
So I always come down on, what if you are the lone single individual there who can stop this?
Yeah.
Keith, the Christian warrior, he's phenomenal. He's
Yep.
he's on the show with Chris all the time, and he talks specifically about this because that's his specialty,
Yep.
training church teams and all of that. For me, I'm not in that world at all. So
Mhm.
my perspective is, if I am the lone individual there, maybe I'm without my family, maybe I'm with my family. That's going to change my own reaction to things, right? But I'm going on
Yeah.
the presumption that probably the only one in the vicinity that can stop this is myself, and that's
Yeah.
a very different mindset.
Yeah. So a little bit of difference between this incident and the Kansas City Super Bowl parade. This was inside of a building. I assume it happened inside, although the church is a large building. We're talking about probably a really, a lot of people in a somewhat confined feeling area versus the shooting at the parade, which was outside, big open. We saw in the bumper at the beginning of the video one of the suspects, running down an alleyway, being tackled by some heroic bystanders. Thank goodness, right, and so on. So the differences in the being prepared for those two incidents, I assume would be there would be some difference in how you would react, or how you would prepare yourself or your family for a close in, tight, maybe inside environment versus an outside environment. How would you speak to that?
Yeah, there certainly is. When we discuss these things, I remind the audience that active shooters still remain so infrequent that it's almost impossible to find, people of like, oh yeah, I've interdicted half a dozen active shooters. It doesn't happen. You have
Yeah.
special forces, ex-military guys who have literally killed, in triple digits the bodies they've stacked, yet they've never been in a situation where gunfire erupts and you're in a church surrounded by people. So
Yeah.
it's such a tough nut to crack that really what we can go on is what is this experience and this cumulative experience that we see happen over and over and over again. So the outdoor thing, exactly right, is going to be a lot different in the fact that, well, just typically, if you're at a crowded event that's outdoors, I mean, anything I can think of in my own lifetime that I've attended that's a big event outdoors is usually a lot of people, right? A
Yeah.
lot
Yeah.
of people.
Likewise. Yep. Hmm.
Whereas if you're in a church, now again, the Olstein Church I is like a mega church. There's
Yeah.
literally, I think literally like thousands of people there,
Yes. Yes.
so it's very different than what we would be dealing with at, again, a small town church where you have maybe 100 people in the place, right? So
Right.
very different environments. I think regardless of the environment, though, what people need to consider is that initial mental checklist that they do when they enter any location. And we've discussed this, what I suggest people do. As
Yeah.
soon as you walk into a place, who's there and what are they doing? You're looking for the anomalies right out of the gate. That becomes harder
Yeah.
to do the more people that are there. Are you
Mm-hmm.
identifying strange behavior as soon as you
Mm-hmm.
walk in, right?
Yeah.
Where are your exits? Where are your points of cover? What is the most likely point of attack? And when I've talked about that in the past, typically that's referring to like the cash registers in a restaurant or something. But if you think about it, if you're in a church, just historically, based on what we've seen, likely point of attack is either they're going to come in from the back and start mass murder, starting with the
Mm-hmm.
people closest to them in the pews in the back, or a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times they're targeting the pastor, which I'm sure you've seen, Denny, over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
There's a specific targeting of the pastor.
Mm-hmm.
So again, if we apply this logic, hey, I'm sitting in a church, what are the most likely points of attack? If it's going to be a mass murder, it's going to start with the pews right in the back. That might be something to consider.
Yeah.
Do you want to sit in the rearmost pew?
Mm.
Where if the likely threat is going to walk through the doors, which most often is at the back of the church, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
your stage, wherever your pastor is at the front.
Yep.
Most likely access is behind you then. Maybe sitting right at the back is the wrong thing to do, just something to consider. Maybe sitting off to the periphery somewhere in the middle. These are
Mm-hmm.
the kind of things. Every church is going to be different. But, if you're an avid churchgoer and you spend every Sunday in a particular building, these are the things to think about. What exits are open? What exits are closed? Are there fire exits that are only accessible from the inside out? They can't
Yeah.
be accessed from outside in. So know your positioning. And if you have the option, position you and your family closer to an exit that you can get out of, but that an attacker would not be entering. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
It certainly does. And, also a big concern and something you and I have discussed in the past and our outline for tonight's discussion is if you do choose to engage that threat yourself, the whole place is filled with innocent targets. People who could catch a bullet when you're trying to get the bad guys, so to speak, and the possibility of being mistaken yourself for the shooter or
Yes.
being shot by, as you've mentioned, another concealed carrier, and that's certainly worthy of
And I,
discussion.
I would submit that is going to be an individual decision for everybody based on your church. So if you go to a big mega church where there's dedicated security teams, you really need to be cognizant of if something happens and you start shooting back,
Mm-hmm.
what is the security team going to do?
Yeah.
Where are those guys? If you have a good security team, they're probably going to be on it real fast, just like we saw in this case.
Yeah.
But again, I come back to see that's just not my realm. We leave that to the professionals. Again,
Yep.
The Christian Warrior stuff.
Yep.
His site is amazing. Look at all the training he
Oh
does.
yeah.
Those are the guys who are really teaching these good teams. I come back to that's totally not my world. Anywhere I'm going, I'm under the presumption that the only one who's likely to be able to stop a bad mass murder is myself. And if
Yeah.
you're in a small church that doesn't have a security team, you should have that knowledge. You'd
Yeah.
say, hey, realistically, there's nobody else here who can stop this. So if it happens, my number one priority is going to be stop it as quickly, stopping it, neutralizing that threat as quickly as possible. But you have to know that, because if you've got a security team there, and then in the melee and chaos of what happens, you don't want to get killed yourself by the responding security team.
Yeah. So yesterday, the shooting at the Super Bowl parade. There's been there are two people have been detained. Everybody speculates. Was this terrorism? There are a lot of questions involved. Um, some heroic bystanders tackled one of these guys. And when I watched several interviews, and when they did, it was reported that an AK style weapon fell from the hands or the body or the clothing of the kid that was tackled. When I say kid, I'm hearing that this was a juvenile, or at least two juveniles were involved, and we're still not sure the circumstances of the shooting. What was the motive behind the shooting? There doesn't seem to be any indication that this was a terrorism act. It could have been two rival gangs. It could have been a drug deal gone bad. It could have been just two dirt bags that didn't like each other. Who knows what? Hopefully we'll figure that part out. But how let's ask ourselves, could we do that? Could we be the person to tackle that person or engage that shooter? The people who tackled the shooter, I believe it was a husband and a wife, Sal, if I read correctly or watched a couple of videos. I actually watched an interview, and it was just like a no thought. And the guy said, when I tackled him, I thought this better be the bad guy. And I took a chance and did that. And lo and behold, a firearm fell from this person's body. Reporting that the wife picked up the firearm and carried it away from the struggle and so on. And again, that brings up the question of, when you pick up a firearm, whether you're engaging the bad guy or you pick up the bad guy's gun, there's always a chance that you could be perceived as the bad guy. So luckily, that didn't happen in this particular circumstance. I think could have happened possibly if a cop turned around at the last minute and the guy was holding an AK. It could have happened. I saw something recently very interesting. Sometimes if you're in a position of a police officer, I have been a police officer as a young man. This hadn't happened to me, but I saw a video today of a cop engaging his own patrol car because he thought shots were being fired from inside the car, when in fact it was just a sound of debris or nuts from a tree falling on his vehicle. And he actually engaged. I saw the video today. I'm not sure. It probably happened days ago. Very unfortunate circumstance. I don't think anybody was injured or killed in that, but there can be a lot of reactive stuff go on when things like that happen. But I digress. I want to talk about the big open areas out in public and things like that. So something we've talked about in the past, and specifically to our viewers who have families and traveling groups and things like that. How can we be more prepared for violent acts that happen outside in the open?
Yeah. So again, the chaos, the primary form of chaos is the crowd itself, right? So when shooting starts, and if a crowd panics, the hardest initial task is just trying to assess the situation
and that's
understand
what
and understand even what's happening.
People were hundreds of people were running different directions, and it was very chaotic.
Right. So, it's the natural human tendency to immediately freeze. And there's a reason for that. That's actually a survival mechanism, right? So if you think of our prehistoric ancestors or whatever. I don't know how much I buy into that. It seems to me there's like all these other things, and then there's man, right? So, but let's say, but hey, we know thousands of years ago there were a lot of tribal men, just like, genetically, just like you and I, but living in primitive settings where literally they could be eaten by things on a daily basis, right?
Yeah.
So when we initially sense danger, we freeze. And the reason for that is that most animal predators hone in immediately on movement, right? If you've ever dealt with like an aggressive dog, if you
chase
run,
instinct.
man, chase instinct, right? So the freeze is a lifesaver against, for large furry creatures. It's a death sentence against a guy with a rifle, right? So, so the initial instinct is to freeze, but I don't think that's all bad when we're dealing with an environment where we're in a large crowd and you don't know exactly the source of the danger
Yep.
yet, right? We just hear gunfire. Denny, I'm sure you've been in instances where's that even coming from?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
I,
Yep. Oh yeah.
in
Sure.
fact, one of the best instances of that I ever experienced was actually a really awesome force on force class where they were specifically putting us in. It was an enormous structure, right? And it
Hmm.
was like to simulate you're looking for a guy in a school, that kind of thing. And literally in a big structure, like you can't even determine where the shooting is coming from,
Yeah.
so if you're in an outdoor venue, you might have an idea of the general direction, but then people are yelling and screaming, running around. Honestly, if nothing else, if you're with your family, get low, get to the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, first thing, right? Get to the ground.
Yeah.
If there's any cover available right near you, cement
Yeah.
abutments, vehicles, get behind something and
Yeah.
get to the ground. That is like
Yeah.
priority number one.
Yeah, I think this is a good time to kind of define cover and concealment so our viewers really understand what that is. So when we talk about cover, we're talking about surfaces that can stop a bullet. Basically, that's what cover is. Concealment is essentially trying to be invisible. A bullet could possibly pass through whatever that is. So we're saying, find cover, take cover,
Mhm.
and that's not always easy to do on the spur of the moment. So with your situational awareness, as you enter a new strange area, you should take inventory of what's around you, the
Mhm.
structures and the area and what it is. And cover, a lot of things can be cover. Things you wouldn't think about. But as Sal, as you mentioned, yeah, just getting low to the ground, and especially in large groups, make yourself as invisible as possible if you don't know which direction to run.
Right.
Now let's say you do know which direction the bad stuff is coming from, and you're not in a position to engage the bad guy for whatever reason. Maybe you're too far away, maybe you don't want to leave your family group, and so on. We've discussed in the past having that family plan. Let's talk about that some more. Let's remind people about that.
Yeah, certainly if you have family members who are adults and older children with you, little kids, they're attached to you, right? If that's every parent of little children realizes how scary thinking through these things is, because
Yeah.
you've got somebody you're literally going to have to pick up and run with.
Yep.
But if you have the adults and older children, teenagers, that kind of thing, having that plan, that's a perfect example when we see these things happen in big crowds. Okay, we're going to this place, whatever it is, a festival out, on the streets, county fair, whatever. Bad things happen. We're going to have that meetup point, right? We're going to get out of
Mhm.
the vicinity. And the meetup point, again, I always come back to this, not in the parking lot, somewhere away from the vicinity,
Yeah.
because while we've not, well, we've seen it attempted, while we've not really seen it successfully done, explosives and planted in vehicles specifically for the crowd that herds into the parking lot.
Yep.
Unfortunately, it's probably coming, right?
Mm.
Because those
Mhm.
are overseas tactics that I'm sure that the terror cells that are in place here will
Mhm.
eventually use. So we want to bear those things in mind. So have that meetup plan. And, again, I think we've discussed this before. If you instill nothing else in your kids, instill in them that things are happening right in the vicinity, know what cover and concealment is, take cover, and if nothing else, just run quickly, get as far away from the vicinity of the danger as
Mhm.
possible.
Yeah.
But I would come back to my kids are not so small anymore, but for a long time I had three little kids, and
Yeah.
basically anywhere I go, I've got three little guys. That's why I've made the point before that if you have small children, your plan A is likely going to guns a lot faster than if you were by yourself, just
Yeah.
because you don't have the means to get away so easily,
Right.
but if you're in a big location, I think in terms of when my kids were little, I take them to the county fair, right? Just
Yeah.
absolutely packed, thousands of people in the vicinity.
Mhm.
If I hear gunfire, and I can't pinpoint where it's coming from. I don't know if this is right or wrong, but I've thought through this. My instinct would be, say I'm sitting there at a picnic table, get the family low to the ground, get behind cover if there's any right there, and then assess what's happening.
Yes.
Part of the problem with just instantly running is you can run right into it, right? You can run
Yeah.
right into the mouth of the lion. That's why
Right.
we have the freeze instinct, right? So I
Mm.
don't know where it's coming from. And again, are you armed or not? So, if you're armed, hey, I'm going to harden my position. I've got some kind of cover here. I'm going to get the wife and kids down, and
Yeah.
I'm armed and ready. And I'm going to assess where is that danger
Yeah.
at. And if it comes now to me, now you're in a better position to deal with it. So just running is not necessarily always the right answer when you
Yeah.
deal with these kind of things. When you simply, just because of the chaos, you don't know where the danger is. Does that make sense?
It certainly does. And, incidents like this are obviously a very, very chaotic atmosphere. We see these, on the video, the people running. Family members were probably separated during that particular incident. And then that's a possibility for us. That could happen to us. Of course, I couldn't imagine a 5-year-old getting away from you very quickly. We're probably going to have the little person really close to us at that point. But what if the older child or the wife gets left behind or confused or whatever? Let's hope you have that meetup plan. Let's hope we've instilled that and talked about that every time we go out to a new environment, a new place, whether it's the mall, a movie, a concert, a football, Super Bowl parade, whatever it is, big churches, etc. And also, I want to reiterate the importance of communication and having the communication devices, phones, cell phones, very important. These days, just about every kid that's 8 years old or older has a cell phone on them, and it's something that's disturbing to me. However, that could be the saving grace in a situation like this, to be able to make that call when that child is missing or your wife is missing, and saying, meet me 4 blocks down the road at Salvatore's Pizza Joint. You have pizza joint, Sal? I don't know. I just pulled that out of the air.
No, it's a good name for a pizza joint, though, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it sounds like good Italian pizza. So, that would be a piece of advice that I would add to this. Make sure you have the means of communication as well. Definitely have that plan in advance, so that you know what to do. You have that plan. We are not always going to be in the exact right circumstance to be the hero. We can be the hero for our family. We can keep our family safe, our friends, whomever we're with, by having the forethought to have that plan and that preparedness and the mindset and the survival mindset and preparedness mindset to know that anywhere, anytime, in any circumstance, this bad stuff can happen. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to come out of nowhere and surprise us. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, no question about it. Again, think of this thing that happened in the outdoor event. Any given day that you're at any kind of festivity like that, people like us who at least think about these things, maybe it'll be less shocking, and hopefully you don't get into that perpetual loop of, I can't believe it's happening, right? The denial of reality, right? But again, while it captures the headlines, I always come back to this, and this is not to encourage people to be complacent. But the reality is this form of violence is still, compared to other forms of violence, is exceedingly rare. It just is. So mass attacks in public locations, even though there's been a definite escalation of it in the past decade, it's still rare enough to the point that I really think even people who prepare themselves with the right mindset, there's still going to be some shock that transpires there. You're not a police officer who's on high alert while you're going into a house responding to a domestic disturbance. That's an exceedingly dangerous environment, right? I don't care who you are. If you're out, at the county fair, you're not expecting it, right? But that's part of mindset. We have to get to the point where we accept it can happen anywhere that we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about defensive preparedness as well. I've got my backpack armor panel here. You know, when I go out to an outside activity, I'm often carrying either a sling bag or a backpack with an armor panel in that. Why? Because I want to be prepared for the worst. If it's even if it's in a backpack, I can bring it around to the front. I can put it on my child. I can have them hug it if I know the threat's coming from this direction, or so, you know, other things that we can do to be prepared. We're not likely to be carrying a big individual first aid kit on our person, but we can certainly carry one in our pack. And let's speak to that as well as a form of preparation, Sal. And we've done it in the past. So let's talk about it again.
Yeah, absolutely. These are great examples of where that really comes into play, right? So this outdoor event, 20 people or 22 people, something like that, were injured.
Yeah.
Okay. We've discussed in the past carrying medical gear. This is a perfect example of an environment where you absolutely can do that, right?
Yep.
If you're at outdoor events, having a sling bag with you with, you know, several of everything, you know, you have a
Yeah.
couple of tourniquets in there, you know, packing gauze, etc. um to be able to help people. The one thing I would mention about that, and in fact this is fresh on my mind, I just within the past month took another great TCCC kind of course. It was taught by an ex special forces medic. I mean, they've been there, done that.
Yeah. Tell us what TCCC is.
So that stands for Tactical Combat Casualty Care.
Yep.
It's sort of, when you have good instructors teach it, they tailor it more for the civilian side of things, you know, so it's not pure TCCC the way they teach it in the military. One thing this instructor really hit on hard, and again, I mean, I've taken numerous medical classes like that. Surprisingly, most of the really reputable instructors for that stuff are ex-military medics. You know, so they have really interesting perspective. But again, they'll put it in the context of civilian. Now, any of the good ones really hit home the scene safety, right? You can't just start giving aid to people who are injured when there's still an active threat going on. You know,
Right.
this is a perfect example of that. If there's still shooting going on, you know, the triage and caring for casualties comes after the threat has been dealt with, right?
Right.
Your first and foremost trauma kit should be the handgun you're wearing, right? And you use that to inflict trauma as necessary, and then your other trauma kit you use to plug holes as necessary, right?
Right.
So you really have to consider those things, you know. And I hate to sound callous like this, Denny, but just as our spirals out of control, my opinion, you know, and my plan with as far as taking care of people is very similar to my plan as far as using force. Not my people, not my circus, not my problem. It's like my priority is my family. Now, after the event, okay, we're sure the threat is over. Absolutely. I'll jump in and be helping people, you know. But if it's about, hey, I'm going to, especially if the family's with me, I'm not going to hang around. You know, I don't care, you know, what has happened, how many casualties there are. There's active threat. My priority is getting the family out of the area of danger, right? So you have to think those things through. That's a very, very serious consideration, is the scene safety. You know, think of in the wake of the Boston bombing, right? Immediately people started helping other people, and that's the noble thing to do. At the time, how did they know there were no secondary devices?
They didn't know.
Right? They didn't know at the time, right? So these are the kind of things you have to think about when the threat is active. The priority is stopping the threat if you're in the position to do that. If you're not in the position to do that, your priority needs to be the safety of your family.
Yeah, cool. Let's summarize some preparedness for incidents like this, Sal. Let's give everybody kind of a brief summary of what can we do. Just let's make a list of some things to keep in mind when heading out and about and being prepared for stuff like this.
Yeah, first and foremost, carry your freaking gun. Carry your gun. Unless you are going into an environment where you are restricted by law, by law. And I won't wade into it. Everybody can make their own determination of what things are restricted by policy or social norms. I'm talking about, don't be carrying into a courthouse or a school, that kind of thing. Don't be violating state, federal law. But, a lot of those no gun signs, folks, do your research about your own state, your own locations, carry no weight of law. Okay. And I guarantee that place of business doesn't have a security force. They'll disarm you with a sign, but have no security force there to protect you, right?
Right.
Carry your gun everywhere you can carry it. It amazes me how over and over and over again we see mass murderers kill a bunch of people in a place. Granted, most often they choose soft targets, right, where there is force of law disarming people. But if you're in a place, we see some happen where people can be carrying and nobody's there wearing a gun. Okay. There's 25 million carry permit holders in this country. 27 states don't even require you to have a permit. Carry your gun. Get trained on it so that you can do it safely and confidently and carry your gun. That's first and foremost. Second, awareness. Everywhere you go, understand the vicinity, do that checklist when you walk in, look for anomalies. Is there something threatening there currently? Where are your exits and entrances? What are points of cover? What are the most likely points of attack? Whether that's retail outlet or, again, coming back to the church, it's either going to be the backmost pews or, the stage, right? Have these things in your mind. And again, the advice I give is only as a sole concealed carrier, right? I do not specialize in training security teams or anything like that. But the vast majority of churches in this country still don't have a security team in place, right? You have small congregations of people, 30 people in a church, whatever. Stephen Williford in the infamous Texas Church of Christ shooting.
Yep.
He was the gentleman who lived across the street from the church. I know him personally. I've talked with him a couple of times. We've interviewed him a couple of times. One of the discussions we had with him, which I've never heard anywhere else, is that particular church, it's a small town, literally of 600 people, so he knows everybody in town. That particular church that day that got shot up, on any usual day, there were 4 different men who carried a handgun in that church. The day the monster showed up and killed 26 people, 2 of those men were out of town and 2 of them were running late.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of churches in this country where you, the person in the audience listening to this, are very well the only armed and prepared person in that church, right? So it's going to be up to you. If you're in a church, small congregation, and you know that, hey, you're not in any jeopardy of getting shot by a responding security team because there isn't one. If there is another concealed carrier and he's a fellow churchgoer, you probably know each other, right? So we're safe there. It's up to you. When that guy comes through the doors and starts shooting, you kill him. That is priority number 1, right? And have that game plan in mind.
Yeah, for sure. Game plan. Have that game plan. If you have family members, other people with you, discuss those game plans. Have that plan in advance always, so that you know where to meet, where to go. Everybody knows what to do. Everybody knows what their job's going to be. And absolutely, 100%. There's so much more we can add to this. We don't have a whole lot more time. So any other little points of interest you want to add to that before we jump to?
It's mindset and carrying the tool at all times possible. And we've had this discussion about dealing with active shooters in the past, Denny. Statistics are on your side. The vast majority of the time, the civilian responder who's armed and has the guts to do it wins over 90% of the time. And the majority of the people who've pulled this off don't even have any kind of formal training. Okay. So if you're carrying, if you're trained, if you're prepared, if you have the right mindset, you have a significant advantage, but you have to take this seriously. Unfortunately, this is the society we now live in, and these lone wolf attacks are only going to increase in frequency now going into the political climate we're in.
Yeah, I would agree. Be paranoid out there. Be paranoid. Be paranoid enough to have a plan. Look over your shoulder every day, everywhere you go, every incident, because it's going to be that one time you don't. When it might happen, you might not have that plan. All right, Sal, let's jump into our conflicted question. Dang it.
Yeah.
Read that one more time, if you would.
Oh, and I think I answered first last time, so
Oh,
I
geez.
think
Okay.
I think you're up.
Fine.
But
All
okay,
right.
so here we go. I'll read it again. Martial law has been declared, and police and military are going house to house looking for food, water, and other supplies to confiscate. Your supplies are well hidden and would not be found through normal questioning and searching procedures. However, the official coming to your house is a relative and knows what you have. He informs you that it is his duty to take your supplies or arrest you and your family. How would you address this situation?
Well, that is not an easy question. It's a
No, not at all.
relative. It's a relative. So it's someone who's close to me. Well, shame on them for being on the wrong side.
Hmm.
For one thing, for one thing, if I knew that they were coming to confiscate all the important survival stuff that I had, I would have it hidden and I would not try not to be around. However, that's not part of the scenario.
Hmm.
Uh, I certainly want to put myself in a position to be arrested, because if they've already declared martial law, this is a post-apocalyptic scenario. For our viewers, this is not right now, right here and today, right here and now as we live. Martial law, post-apocalypse. It's the grid is down. Maybe things are really bad. I might have maybe I have had the forethought to have some of these supplies separate, or some of the supplies that I'm currently using, to be able to sort of give up and say, okay, you can have it. Here's what I've got, and hope that my relative who's on the wrong side of things believes me and will do that. I don't know if that's a cop out answer, but that's going to be my answer. I'm going to give up a little bit of my stuff to try to keep myself there with my family and not be arrested and taken away from them, to be able to protect them or have the rest of my gear taken away. So I'm going to lie my ass off and maybe give up a little bit, so that I don't have to sacrifice a lot, which might include my family. So that's going to be my answer.
Yeah. So judging by the scenario, there's obviously some element of time because they're not at our door yet, right? So, and this relative has told us that they're going to give us up. So I'm thinking along the lines you are, right?
I
Yeah,
see
there
what you're saying.
must
I see
be,
what we're getting
right?
at. Yeah,
It's not unless he literally called like 2 minutes before, while they're
yeah,
rolling down your road. So
yeah.
we don't really know what the time element is there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's literally he just called us and they're 2 minutes away, we don't have time to do much,
Right.
right? So maybe it's a matter of just getting the family and getting out of there, possibly.
Yeah,
If we have time where we have days or a week out, and he said, "Hey, listen, I'm going to give you up. It's my duty to," then
yeah,
I think, relative or not, he's just declared himself as a direct threat to your family and maybe should be dealt with in kind. Just
yeah.
throwing it out there.
Yeah, that ran through my mind. There's a little bit more to this that
Mhm.
this hypothetical situation, we don't know all the details. That's an interesting way of looking at it, with that survivalist mentality. If you just have your crap together, and your family plan solid enough, so you gather everybody up in your supplies and get the heck out of there, and just try to regroup and reinvent yourself somewhere else. I don't know. That's a tough one. That's why they call this conflicted.
Yes. And
And
there's
it,
so many variables, right? So if we're like at the point of, well, if it's martial law, I would think it's like right on the heels of even maybe like a localized event. Now, if
yeah,
that's the case, then all of your supplies being seized is not a death sentence if we're talking about like a Hurricane Katrina, right?
right.
But these kind of conflicted questions, I think, steer towards more towards like post-apocalypse post-apocalypse, it's as bad as it gets. The only means of survival is what you have put away. And again, if that's the case, then a betrayal like that is a direct threat to you and your family. And that's where maybe having that good scoped rifle comes into play.
Maybe so.
You
Maybe so.
make a little visit, and I hate to even go there in my mind, but
yeah, good point. I'm interested in seeing what the viewers have to say about this one, Sal. So, guys, we do read those comments. We want to know what you would do in this scenario. It's not always easy to make these type of decisions. We're sitting here in a very reasonable. We're in control of our life, a reasonable environment, and normal lives, and who knows what we're going to do and think. In a post-apocalyptic scenario. So bottom line out there, this goes back to being prepared as well, doesn't it, Sal? Really about having a plan.
Oh, and an immediate bug out plan. Denny, what comes to mind, do you remember the fires in Hawaii just a few months ago where and there were fires, I want to say, in Colorado in the mountains. And again, you talk about great bug out location to live. People literally had to run for their lives from a fire. So I tell people, do you literally have a bug out plan where you have packs that are already packed, where you could literally grab a few packs and run for your lives, you and your family? That should be part of what people think about, So when I read a conflicted question like this, if they're 2 minutes down the road, can I literally get in the vehicle or even hoof it on foot back into the woods and get out of there in literally minutes? And that's part of preparedness.
Yeah, certainly is. It seems like I read a little some tips, and some of this was addressed in your book, 21st Century Minuteman. Tell us about that once again, real quick. Remind folks about your book.
Yes, and in fact, I want to say it's the very last chapter of the book talks about bug out plans ranging from the time element. Okay, we have this much time, we can load the vehicle, right? All the way down to literally, I have to get out of the house right now. What am I grabbing? So I do, in fact, address that in pretty deep discussion in the book.
Yeah. And again, we made reference to some other subject matter experts. Keith, Christian Warrior, you can see him on our Survival Dispatch channel. Often he's on Survival Dispatch News with Chris Heaven, the CEO of Survival Dispatch, who hosts those segments quite often. Bottom line, guys, be prepared. Always be vigilant. Know what's going on around you. Situational awareness. Yada yada, and most importantly, keep watching Survival Dispatch News. We're going to bring you the late breaking stuff. We're going to analyze it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to give you some advice based on what our knowledge, our experience. There might be something we missed. Let us know in the comments. And these two incidents that we've discussed today, what would you do? Would you be prepared for something like this out of the blue, whether it's in a big church, little church, or out in public? Let us know. Do you travel with your family? Do you have a family plan? Do you carry backpacks with ballistic panels? Do you carry first aid kits? Let us know how you live your lives and are in a preparedness manner and with a survivalist mindset. We do read the comments. We do want to know. Sal, thank you so much. As always, you give us so much insight and knowledge. We really appreciate you. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you hit those buttons, like, subscribe, comment, and share. And until next time, stay safe out there.